Alright, hi everybody, I'm back for part 2 of my video series entitled Why Do We Need to Borrow If We Can Create Something Without Limit? And in the last video I talked about the concept of government borrowing, which is really an inapplicable concept under the current monetary system where the government essentially can create as much of its own money as it wants. So why do you need to borrow what it can create without limit? Doesn't make any sense. And I use the example of an artist who can create works of art without limit, not needing to have to get back the works that he originally created in order to create more. And I left off by saying, some of you might say, well, yes, Mike, that's true. However, if the artist creates too much art of his art, the value of that art might go down. And this is applicable to the foreign exchange value of the US dollar. If the US government creates too much of its money, it could have an adverse effect on the foreign exchange value of the US dollar. Now, why should we care about that? The world went to a floating exchange rate system back in the 1970s. Basically because we tried the other systems and they didn't work. We tried the gold standard, that didn't work. We tried fixed exchange rates, that didn't work. And indeed, for some countries that went on fixed exchange rates or gold standards, since that time, the results have been disastrous. So the world pretty much went to a floating exchange rate, non-convertible currency system. And under that system, the foreign exchange value of a nation's currency can fluctuate up or down. In 2000 to 2002, the dollar was very strong. Its foreign exchange value, now it has lost some of that strength. But why should we care? Really, because, and I pointed out in a prior video, that the United States, we produce 83% of what we consume. So the vast majority of the things that we produce are produced right here in the United States. And if the exchange rate leads to the full utilization, if that floating exchange rate leads to the full utilization of all of our productive capital and resources, then why do we care that it fetches a lower value against some foreign currency? Now, it might have a negative impact on you or me if we decide to take a trip to Paris or London, but if we are living as a nation at the highest level that we can live, in other words, people are productively employed, we are able to accumulate the real assets and the financial assets that we will need for later on in life, and the real assets that we need to live our lives in a quality way right now, then what is all the hullabaloo about the foreign exchange value of the US dollar, which is going to float? You know, the late Nobel economist William Vickrey once said that exchange rates, floating exchange rates, are the way that nations, that economies adjust for differences in the rate of return on capital. It's the most efficient way to do that. Capital and money will flow to where it is more efficient, and the floating exchange rate facilitates that mechanism. To be so focused on the foreign exchange value of the US dollar and not the standard of living that we have here in the United States, where at this very moment we have 15 million people who are out of work, who can be productively employed. We are only using 68% of our industrial capacity. In other words, we have so much of our productive capital is just sitting there idle. And we are so intensely focused on the foreign exchange value of the US dollar that it's almost like we're putting ourselves on a quasi-gold standard, to be fixated on the exchange value of the dollar when, in essence, we went off of that system, and for good reason, is in effect bringing us back to a time when we did have a gold standard or a fixed exchange rate, and this ties our hands. It limits our ability to make the investments that we need to make here to engage all of the productive capital, the human capital, and the physical capital to produce the highest output, and by definition that means the highest level of wealth and prosperity for people who live in America. So, something to think about. As always, I'm sure I'll get a lot of comments from this. Many of you probably don't agree, but that's your prerogative not to agree. We went on the floating exchange rate system, and as a result, we should not worry about the fact that the foreign exchange value of the US dollar is going to fluctuate. What we should worry about is, are we using all of our productive capital to achieve the highest standard of living that this country is able to achieve? And we are far, far from that by any measure, and certainly just by looking at how many people there are who are unemployed. It's awful. It's a terrible shame. All right, that's it for now, and check back here. I will be having more videos soon, and as always, feel free to send in your comments. Take care. Bye.